Hello and welcome to Checking the Vitals, a podcast powered by Specialty Care. I'm Todd Schlosser, and joining me today is Artem Zhosan. In this episode, we discuss how he transitioned from being a perfusionist in Ukraine to becoming an RN and ECMO specialist here in the United States. We also discuss what his day-to-day is like as an ECMO specialist, who exactly he works with every day, and what he loves about his job. Enjoy the conversation. So Artem, thank you so much for joining us on Checking the Vitals today. I really appreciate it. I like to start out a lot of the episodes by finding out what it was that made our guest want to seek out a career in healthcare. So what was it that made you choose this sort of career path?
Oh, thank you, first of all, for inviting me. And
Absolutely.
My career in healthcare is a long story. I'm originally from Ukraine, so I moved to the United States in 2015. And in Ukraine, I also worked certain healthcare. I was a perfusionist, and I liked what I do. And in the United States, when I moved, for me it was like a natural decision what to do. And I chose healthcare career. I chose nursing, so I jumped into my first months in nursing school. I finished in did my bachelor's in 4 years. I started my nursing career, and that's it. I just like what I do. I like helping people and basically changing their lives and the very, let's say, tip of my fingers, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely understand that want to help people and the desire to help people. A lot of people we talked to on the podcast sort of share that desire. Do you mind if I ask how long you practiced as a perfusionist in the Ukraine?
4 years.
Okay, so you were there for a while practicing as a perfusionist, came here, and then had to go to nursing school here, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Interesting. Okay. So how long have you been an ECMO clinician in, I guess, the LA area?
In the LA area, specifically, I'm ECMO clinician since May this year, since I work with specialty care.
Okay.
I also worked as ECMO specialist in Bay Area, where I lived previously, for maybe half a year, a little less.
Okay.
In 2020, when we were on the peak of COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
So, because I worked as a pre and post operative room nurse, in a surgery center. And when the pandemic started and peaked, I was invited to work as ECMO specialist. I said, yeah, why not? It's exciting and interesting.
I'm sure. Yeah. And you honestly do seem like someone who, when they see a new opportunity, they're like, oh, I'd love to learn more about that. But it also seems like there'd be a lot of overlap in perfusion and ECMO, right? And
that's correct.
With your background as a perfusionist in the Ukraine, I'd imagine that a lot of it came, maybe not naturally because you had to learn it at some point, but you already knew a lot of that information.
Yeah, you're very right. So from the scientific standpoint, all the basics, let's say human anatomy or human physiology.
Sure, yeah.
Surprisingly, they're the same in Ukraine and the United States.
I'd imagine so. Yes, sir.
Yeah. But for example, from the, let's say, scientific standpoint, clinical approach, from the equipment standpoint, from the practical approach, how it's organized in the hospitals, everything is different. Nursing is different. Perfusion is different. ECMO is different. When I left Ukraine, we honestly even didn't have ECMO.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
Here I just started learning ECMO from the beginning. I knew the basic principles, but
Sure.
For example, I didn't do ECMO before. So I did it like everybody else. I just started from the beginning, and I like what I do. And for me, it's just, I feel like this is a very new technology, even for the United States, and a new specialty, because just this year was introduced a certification for ECMO specialist that I already have, that I'm very proud of. So,
you must be one of the first, because it is very new.
Yeah, and because the specialty is very new, there is a many, let's say, gray zones when you are on the very top, on the very front of the specialty, like zones that are overlap with different other specialties, and you kind of at some point you're thinking you're going forward. At some point you're afraid that you're not overstep somebody else's, let's say, scope of practice or something like this.
How do you navigate that? And who specifically, I don't mean like, don't give me a person, but like what other specialties do you sometimes rub up against as an ECMO specialist? Like, is it perfusionists? Is it audiologists? Like, who is it that you're rubbing up against as you try and do your scope of practice?
So let's say from the bottom up, so there's two specialties that can start as ECMO specialists, like nurses, registered nurses, and respiratory therapists.
Right.
Obviously, perfusionists and doctors also can run ECMOs.
Sure.
At the same time, on the top, we have perfusionists and doctors. So between and all range between, let's say, nursing and perfusionists and doctors, it's like you can go as much up as the top level allows you.
Sure.
And in different hospitals, it's very different. So, for example, that's why in our specialty, it's very important to understand, let's say, the policies of the hospitals where we work in, and to feel what they want from us, and not to, let's say, not to apply common practices of one hospital and to assume that another hospital will feel comfortable with the same.
Sure.
Because for some, when we go in some hospitals, they say, you can do this, this, and this. But in some hospitals, oh, you can do even more. So that's why usually we just, the safest way is just, okay, what you want me to do?
Yeah.
Or to what extent you want me to do, to practice. Or usually if, let's say, if in doubt, we just check with perfusionists, we check with doctors, we check with nurses we work with. And it's all depends on skills, on the level of comfort of what we're doing. And first of all, is patient safety.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I'm sure, and I know that with ECMO specialists right now, because ECMO is in such high demand right now, you probably are going to different hospitals servicing that need, right? So, and every hospital is going to have a very different, maybe not very different, but slightly different slant on what patient care is considered. And you want to be cognizant of that. You want to know what that is. So the best way of doing that has to be just open lines of communication with the people above you, like the doctor or the perfusionist that would be maybe managing the ECMO specialist team, I'd imagine. Although I don't know, and maybe we should sort of dig into that some. What is a day-to-day life like for an ECMO specialist?
As you mentioned, it's very important, this communication. So day-to-day life starts, for example, when I come to my shift first. I usually try to come early, like 10, 15 minutes, so I get report from the previous person who is on the shift.
Absolutely.
And I like to join, like during the day, I like to join all the rounds, like doctor's rounds, nursing rounds. So I'm first, I kind of not only introduce myself, but I immerse myself in this environment. Let's say I take part in their work and they see my engagement. And second, I'm on the top of the information about the patient. So I know what's happening here and now with every patient. And this helps in my work. And
I'm sure,
also,
and you're getting that just actually by participating in the rounds the doctor's making? Okay.
Yeah, I try to participate in rounds that doctors making, nurses making. So especially with doctors, so I know what is the actual situation, what is the plan for, let's say, for the nearest future, for the extended future. And knowing this, I can communicate with them on the same level. So I can, I have the information, I can process this information, and I can work with this information and, let's say, talk to doctors on the same level, talk to nurses on the same level. So I'm not, let's say, because in the hospitals, we are, let's say, hospitals kind of outsource our work, right? Yeah. So we are not hospital employees from the specialty care. Because we provide our services, our expertise in some level, our skills. But at the same time, to be fully engaged, I want to be them to feel like I'm actually a hospital employee. Like I work at the same front line with them. So I have to be fully engaged, same as they are. I cannot just stay on the side and say, okay, guys, this is your kitchen. You just do your job. I'll just do my job, and we don't overload, right?
So you have to integrate yourself with an already existing, I'd imagine, like an ICU team or emergency room team. So I'd imagine that can be difficult, especially if you're in a new hospital. I mean, I'm sure that you go to a few hospitals around your area, so you probably over the course of a year get to sort of know everybody. But for the first 6 months in your many different hospitals, it's probably very nerve-wracking to be like, oh, this is a brand new team. I don't know anybody here. How do I ubiquitously join this team, even though I'm not technically an employee of that hospital? So how do you go about doing that?
You just join it. You just, as I said, you try to join all, let's say, communication is very important in this work. So it's about not be afraid to ask questions. So when you're very new in the hospital, nobody expects you to know everything about the hospital. So it's normal to ask questions. It's normal to, I know if you don't know something, also to clarify. To seek information about the patient, seek information about some procedures. I don't know the name of this doctor. Okay, just ask a name from the nurse or something like this.
Yeah.
So just also it's like communication with nurses to form sort of a supportive relationship, because this is I would say most important, because in our work we just don't do our part of the job. We also help each other. Because let's say in many instances, I help nurses do their job, and vice versa, they help me do my job.
Sure.
Because I have during my shift, I can have many patients simultaneously at the same time. So, but by the physics rules, I cannot be at the same time in several places. So sometimes nurses just help me. They just say me, okay, there's happening there, or even they can intervene even before I jump into action.
Yeah, they might page you, but they have to do something before you're able to physically make it to the room, right?
Yeah, it's correct.
Yeah.
So that's why, like on the basic human level, like forming this relationship, like I know just by being engaged, just by talking, just by, let's say not hiding in the corner and not pretending that you are not part of this hospital. It's very helpful. And I know being just, let's say, probably it's too simple to say easygoing person. I would say it's a professional. Being a professional, because I also take it as I represent not only myself, I represent the company, right?
Sure,
and, by the way they look at me, by the way I work, they will judge specialty care as a company. So I want to be perceived as a professional that represents big, serious companies that's good to work with.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'll say this, and of course, I'm sure specialty care really appreciates you viewing it that way, that you are a representative of specialty care, and that to you, it's important that specialty care is viewed as professional and stuff like that. But it also benefits you. I mean, I have gotten so many jobs just because I met someone doing something that was sort of unrelated to my day-to-day life. And they saw me as a professional person who knew how to get stuff done. And, they called and got me on the project or whatever, because they met me and they knew of my character. So I'd imagine that that'll happen to anybody in this kind of situation. So it does sort of behoove both you and the company to act that way.
I know a relationship is such kind of magic thing. When you form them, they benefit your job, your personal relationship, your career, everything. Yeah,
absolutely.
Obviously, on the bottom line, it makes your life easier.
Yeah,
your work easier and everything. It starts, for example, when you start like as a very new hospital, you may have like a little struggle in getting information and communication with the doctors and something like this. But over a couple of days or even like maybe weeks, but when they get you, when they start knowing you better and know that you are just, you're professional. You're, I know if you ask something, it's relative, it's legit question, or if you advise something, it's also can be helpful, or you're doing your job well. So people start, doctors start communicating with you more.
Because you've established that credibility with them.
Yeah. It's a correct word. You establish credibility, and people start really working with you, asking questions, asking advice, and starting discussions. And you feel like, okay, I grown up to their level, so they now view me as their peer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let me ask this, because you brought this up when you mentioned a nurse maybe paging you to come down to that specific ECMO. So as an ECMO specialist, like clinician in a hospital, are you overseeing many ECMOs that are going on that floor, or are you assigned to one specific one?
Technically, usually we have, let's say, we can have different number of patients in hospital in general.
Sure.
So company has a policy that up to 4 patients we can oversee, like one ECMO specialist.
Okay.
If on the floor in ICU we have more than 4 patients, we'll have another person on the shift.
Okay. So it's you, if it's up to 4, over 4, it's going to be you and someone else.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So, but you may be seen as like the ECMO specialist because, I mean, honestly, that's your title, ECMO specialist. So you may have someone page you to run down there and help out with a problem. What sort of problem might come up that you may have to deal with? Is it always like machine related, like technical with the ECMO device itself that you have to troubleshoot, or could there be other things you might have to assist with?
It could be a lot of different things, because machine itself, let's say, it's not only machine. We, let's say, our job is, actually, machine is just a, let's say, side part, because the main thing is a patient.
Absolutely,
so, for example, whatever is happening with a patient, we, for example, even basic things like, for example, patient needs to be turned, or let's say sometimes, let's say the COVID patients, they may be, let's say, prone, basically, let's say simple words, to lie down on their belly.
Okay.
Right. To be turned from the laying on the back to laying on the belly.
Okay.
In the simple, let's say, in the usual word, it's simple process. In ICU, when patient has a tons of equipment around and a tons of tubes coming out from the patient,
sure,
just turning patient around, it's a real process that takes up to 8 people to execute.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And to make it safe, I also have to be present. So I'm sure that let's say no lines become kinked, no lines become pulled out, nothing will disrupt the, let's say, integrity of the circuits. The machine will continue working smooth, everything going smooth, also to help, or like whatever. So basically, whatever they're doing, different kind of processes, we have to make sure that what they do is safe from ECMO standpoint.
Okay.
Because even simple person who can come inside, let's say, for doing ultrasound, let's say this person not related to ECMO, but person who doesn't know what ECMO means or what safety risk is possessed, this person can just, let's say, by accidentally move this ECMO or kink a line or something like this, and this event itself can put a patient's life in danger. So just to prevent this, usually we assist during most of the procedures that are happening with the patient.
So you're really there in the room with your one patient your whole shift, I'd imagine, or maybe a few patients, up to 4, but you're with them 100% of your shift, more or less.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. So basically, all my shift, I just run between patients, because all of them have different kind of events happening all the time. So sure. I just go from one to another.
I'd imagine a lot of your day is on your feet, sort of walking around from room to room, or at least machine to machine, to check on all of the patients.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something like this. So basically, for example, in the morning after I do my rounds, let's say if I start, let's say, one shift at 6 a.m., I do first, let's say, get reports from my previous shift. Then I check again all machines, everything. Sometimes, usually there is some procedures that we have actually to do every shift with the machines themselves, checks and everything. Let's say at 7 o'clock we have nursing rounds that I attend and listen. At 9 o'clock we have doctors' rounds. But in between there's things that are happening with the patients, so I just run between them and just help them. Also, this is just routine when we assume that ECMO is fine. But also there is a procedures that like starting ECMO or let's say ending ECMO for one or another reason. So in this case, we usually have also perfusionist come, and this another big procedure that we can assist, help. We can prepare ECMO, like set up a new machine, and a little of paperwork, but it's boring to mention.
Yeah, well, I mean, but you do want to track everything, because that might be, even though it may not seem important, it might become important down the line for whatever reason. So I understand that sort of stuff is not fun to talk about, but is important. If you don't mind, I'd like to dig in a little bit more about putting someone on and then taking someone off ECMO. So is it you're there to assist, but a perfusionist is in the room putting them on ECMO, and then you're there to monitor it? Like, how much of that putting them on, taking them off of ECMO are you hands-on with as an ECMO specialist?
This is another, let's say, gray zone in the our let's say specialty, because in some hospitals, even an ECMO specialist can assist a surgeon, because technically there is like small surgery team that puts the patients on ECMO.
Okay.
And in some hospitals, specifically just ECMO specialists can do this.
Oh, okay.
In some hospitals, for example, in a hospital here in LA area, they require a perfusionist to start this. Okay. So I may, in this particular case, I usually I can prepare the machine itself. I can bring it. I can bring all needed equipment, accessories. I know, so perfusion just comes and starts. I know there's some paperwork, but also it also depends, on the training of ECMO specialists, and because let's say always the baseline is patient safety, so nobody wants to compromise it. So if you're comfortable, you can do it. If you're not, it will be done by perfusionists.
Yeah, I'd imagine that, and maybe this is unfair, but because of your experience as a perfusionist, you sort of know maybe a little bit more than a regular ECMO specialist might. So your ability to help in that situation is probably a little bit higher than most brand new ECMO specialists. Just from a comfortable standpoint, you're more comfortable with that sort of thing because it's something you have 4 years of experience doing.
Here's also a tricky question, because here we also have not only my level of comfort, but the level of comfort of whole team.
Yeah, sure.
And the whole team, let's say legally, I'm not a perfusionist in the United States, right?
Right.
I'm a nurse and ECMO specialist.
Right.
So also, let's say if from the legal standpoint something goes wrong,
sure,
I'm again not a perfusionist. So this will be again a tricky situation. So it's like, let's say nurses. Let's say I'm sure you can do I know injection of vaccine, IM injection.
Sure.
It's not rocket science, right?
Right.
Do IM injection. But for example, if you enter the hospital, if you're not up to registered nurse or above, you cannot do it.
And that's just the legal threshold they want you to meet, because
that's correct.
Yeah, those are just the rules of the hospital. Okay.
If you're in your home and you're giving your vaccine, it's your personal job. But if you're in a hospital, only registered nurse and up can you give a vaccine.
Okay, interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that makes sense from a, accountability standpoint. And obviously, hospitals are going to want to cover themselves. Any business would want to cover themselves from a legal risk or like a red flag sort of legal risk standpoint. I understand that completely. Yeah.
So, for example, that's why it's all depends on hospital policies and how they want to work, how they want to, let's say, process certain things, and how they want to manage certain procedures.
Okay.
What equipment, what team, what level of training, or what level of personal. Like it should be done by ECMO specialists or it should be done by perfusionists.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we've sort of talked through like the day-to-day of what an ECMO specialist does, actually, in the hospital, what are some of your favorite parts of the actual job of being an ECMO specialist?
I actually like a lot seeing patients getting healthier. And especially, ECMO is the highest probably current technology to, let's say, for sick patients, because it's, let's say, we know patients get sick, they get on ventilator, but even when ventilator fails, they get an ECMO, and ECMO is a last resort.
Yeah, it's like the last line of defense, especially for a lot of COVID patients.
Yeah, for COVID patients last. And honestly speaking, let's say about maybe 30%, or let's say the survivability is like maybe 60%.
Okay.
So it's not, let's say there are many patients not survive. But when you see like patients that are, let's say they can be on ECMO days or weeks, or some patients even months.
Yeah.
After all, they stand up and do their first steps, and many patients cry because when you see an adult man that standing up like very weak, but he's doing his first step and he starts crying, it's because it's not a child. He doesn't understand the benefit of it.
Sure.
It's an adult human who understands that he's kind of making his first step back to life.
Yeah.
And back to life literally.
Yeah.
It's like one step back to life, one step away from death.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this and we see this progress. Like right now, for example, I have a couple of patients that do this, and I come to work every day, and we work with a physical therapist and all together, and we walking so this patient trying to do his first steps, and all equipment should be moved with this patient.
Sure.
So we move this all equipment, and one step, like yesterday, one step, today we do like 5 steps, and everybody is happy and cheering. So this is really kind of rewarding because you see the progress and of the work, and how it changes. Let's say it's not only changes lives, it's kind of saves lives.
No, it absolutely does. I think it's got to be, I don't want to say a rush, a thrill maybe, to have such a profound impact on these people's lives for the very short time, hopefully very short time, that you're a part of it. So you get to see them literally come back from their worst, health speaking, right? So that's got to be emotional. It's got to be very rewarding, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's very emotional always. Yeah. And it's the best part, seeing like patient healing, and I know especially seeing patients being discharged home or being discharged, even discharged from ICU or discharged from ECMO.
Yeah.
So when we decannulate, like discontinue ECMO, and patient like goes for, let's say, downgrades his care from just, usually after ECMO, patient continues in recovery. But anyway, it's a big step forward.
Yeah, I mean, if you're to the point of ECMO, that's sort of the last line of defense against death on when you have COVID. So being able to have been on ECMO and then no longer be on ECMO, that I'd imagine, and maybe not in every situation, but you are now on the path to recovery. And correct me if I'm wrong, but once you get to the point where you can be taken off ECMO, you're not likely to need to go back on it later because you're in the recovery stages of COVID. Is that how it works?
Many cases, yes. So and from medical standpoint, here is some more complicated because ECMO is a bridge, like to something, and for some patients, they can be recovered. But for example, some patients it's a bridge to recovery. For some patients, ECMO can be bridge, for example, for lung transplant.
Okay.
So they can, let's say their body kind of recovered, but for example, the lungs received like the damage. So the lungs are not only no longer.
They're no longer like viable on their own.
Yeah, the lungs are no longer viable. So you just okay. So but patients will they kind of recovered, but they need a lung transplant. But anyway, these patients will be discharged to a hospital where they can have a lung transplant. And we had such kind of patients, and this is also a victory because I know anyway they survived. They can have it's not a best case scenario, but it's still a better than a death.
Yeah, I think the way you put it is perfect. The bridge. You are a bridge to give the body time to heal on its own. And if it can't heal on its own, because, for instance, the lungs are no longer viable, it bridges them to a transplant. So I mean, because they wouldn't have made it without that ECMO. And
ECMO by itself is not, ECMO doesn't heal. ECMO is not a healing procedure, right?
It sort of buys you time, right?
Yeah, ECMO provides time. So if, for example, ECMO, you have, let's say patient has sick lungs, we just unload the lungs work. So ECMO does all the work for lungs and buys time for lungs to recover.
Sure.
And at the end of this bridge, we have either recovery, or if lungs doesn't recover, we need a transplant.
Yeah.
So it should be something.
Okay.
For me, like what is also interesting about this job is like, I feel like I'm doing, let's say I'm working on the very edge of, science and technology. And for me, it's always what I wanted to do. Yeah. And it's like, it's challenging. It's always learning. It's always like, even every day we had, like other day we had with a doctor, discussion of a patient, like what can be done differently, what we can find new, or what can we change to do something different, because there was a difficult case. And for example, a doctor was out of ideas, I was out of ideas. And for example, he brought one idea, we kind of wasn't sure. Then I went home, I just digged for some articles. I found an article that, for example, actually it was implemented in another hospital. I printed this article, brought to the doctor. He said, "Yeah, I told you it can be done." I said, "Yeah, it technically can be done."
Yeah.
So it's like always, you feel like you're on the front line, and front line, not only medicine, but front line of top of technologies. So whatever, you really can improve something and find something new. And let's say you're doing the best you can for these patients.
Yeah. So you're never going to be bored, it sounds like.
At least I'm never bored, because I always look at every patient like, okay, what can I do different? What to make a difference?
And I imagine most people, if not all people in the hospital realm, are trying to push forward patient care for whatever their specialty is. So I'd imagine that you're not alone in that desire to always want to make it better for every patient.
Yeah, this is also what, let's say, impressed me first, is like how the friendly environment and the welcoming environment that, let's say, I found in the company and in ICU. That it's like, probably because it's so tough at times. Yeah. It's the only way to survive is like, keep things friendly. So, because if we don't help each other, we just fall apart.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that's the last thing you want to have happen in that situation, because I can't think of a more high stakes place to work than a hospital. It literally is life and death in a lot of situations. Yeah. And you need a team who is cohesive and willing to work together, and, just welcoming of new people, because teams rotate. So I'd imagine that that's very important.
Yeah, that's correct.
Well, Artem, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate you joining us here on Checking the Vitals to talk to us about what it's like being an ECMO specialist.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Glad to do it. Thank you for listening to Checking the Vitals. If you enjoyed the content we provide, please leave us a 5-star rating and review. It really does help people find the show. And make sure you subscribe so you hear our interviews with healthcare innovators every Monday.